Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, the weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duva, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's John 117 in the streets, but Master Chief in the sheets.
What? Tim Longo. What? Oh, man. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I had
good.
to get a good first-person shooter one there for you. I had to look up what his name was. That he was John 117. That's some deep lore right there. Yeah. I did see, was it the end of Halo 3, I think, where his name was revealed? She calls him John before he flies out the ship or something like that. I don't know. I feel like I played that.
I think it might have been revealed in a book before that, but yeah.
Wow, yeah. Books. Who reads books about video games? Anyway, hello. We're here to talk about a first-person shooter.
Not
that
one.
Not that one. We're starting a new series about the original Half-Life, developed by Valve Software, a studio founded by Gabe Newell, who was an early employee of Microsoft's, and so he had all kinds of Microsoft stock money. And Microsoft was riding pretty high back in the mid-'90s when he would have left. And he went and took that and founded a studio, and, well, we all know how that turned out. They made a few games, and then they were pretty much not heard from again. No. Of course, Valve has had this huge impact on the industry, and it started here. But it was in a year that was pretty busy. We looked at some of the titles there. You want to read some of them off?
Yeah, I mean, I remember 98 being, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's stuck in my head ever since. And that's, if anyone ever asked me, what was the best year for video games? 98 is always comes, at least for me personally, comes to mind.
It's in the conversation for sure. I mean, when I was on the podcast with Jason Schreier and Kirk Hamilton a few weeks ago, I talked about how I started in 98 and ended in 2004 at LucasArts. Mm-hmm. And they were like, wow, those are 2 years, man.
Yeah. So Starcraft came out. We had Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Unreal 1,
Ocarina of Time,
little game called Ocarina of Time. Half-Life, Grim Fandango, Rogue Squadron, Rainbow Six. Yes, the first Rainbow Six.
The red and blue Pokemons.
And red and blue Pokemon. Yeah, Thief 1, personal favorite, but
Descent Freespace, which is something that influenced us on Starfighter, and me especially with the level editor. Dune 2000, which basically was kind of revisiting. They had kind of been the ones who had launched the real-time revolution, although, of course, it was a lot further along by now, but they came back with sort of a remake, I think, of Dune 2 or whatever it was at that point. And then Shogo Mobile Armor Division, which was the first lift tech game. And I mention that because Valve licensed the Quake engine to make this. But this was a time when, like, 3D engines and licensing 3D engines, to get up to speed and be able to make content for 3D worlds, which were the coming thing, right, at the time. Quake was just 1996. Of course, Unreal was this year. But you also had Thief, which was the Dark engine that we mentioned, and Shogo, which was Lift Tech, which would go on to be in like No One Lives Forever 1 and 2, and a couple other really good games like the Tron 2.0 game that I quite liked. So there were all this like DNA of 3D engines at the time, and of course, Valve would take the Quake engine and kind of make it their own. They'd add more physics interactions. I wouldn't say necessarily more physics, but more physics interactions that they would push a lot further in Half-Life 2 when they kind of made the engine their own and rebranded it as the source engine. But this is where it kind of got its start was as a Quake, as a Quake-based engine.
And even Call of Duty engine, right, and Medal of Honor engines had their early code foundation was from the Quake engine as well, right?
Yep, I believe that's true.
COD today, I think, uses Radiant to still as their level editor.
Oh man,
still today. Imagine?
Wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. So all the Call of Duty games are built on that. Yeah, it's funny how that I mean, you'd have to describe to me more than than I would really know myself. But like, I've known that all along, but the legality of how that all works just always kind of baffles my mind about how there's some sort of Quake code in the source engine and in the COD engine that I just don't know how that is possible.
How that's still legit. Well, I think, at a certain point, there's just like, they've licensed it, and they licensed it for a title, and maybe they made a deal, right? At that point.
They branched.
They definitely branched, because by the time like Quake 2 and certainly Quake 3 are coming along, this had diverged pretty far. I think that Half-Life 2 started from the Quake 2 engine, but had made it so different by the time it actually came out that you really couldn't identifiably say it was still the same engine.
Yeah.
Although it certainly had its genesis in that they had made so many modifications. But, it was a good starting point, and certainly they haven't been hurting for money for a long time. And of course, Half-Life 2 would have been the game that they went to launch Steam with. So, they never had money concerns again after that.
Well, and I think, not to jump into that too much, but I do recall, Steam had a rocky start, as you may remember, right? Like, it wasn't really, and we shouldn't spend too much time.
People weren't very accepting of it either.
No, it was seen as a downside, right? Why I can't play this new Half-Life 2 without being connected to the internet and all this kind of stuff. But then slowly but surely, yeah. But 98, just amazing game, amazing year. Oh, Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh yeah,
also that year.
Another good one. I think we already said Metal Gear and Baldur's Gate, but a lot of amazing games coming out, and Baldur's Gate being kind of the beginning of the last hurrah of a certain type of 2D, RPG. Of course, we just played Planescape, which was descended from that, and talked to Chris Avellone last week. So we're very much in this mindset of this time right now, because that was what was going on.
Yeah, I think just really quickly, because this is our first, I guess you could say, traditional shooter that we've played for the podcast, and so it's hard to pick, especially for me. Shooters are somewhat, they're in my blood, for better for worse, and it's hard for me to pick, like, where do you start? Where do you start with this? And actually, as I mentioned, I think in the previous episode, compliments to Jeff Morris for calling us out of, like, we haven't done a shooter yet, even though he knew that I wanted to talk about him. So it's hard to pick just one to start with. We'll do others, I'm sure. But before this, right, we had some of the landmark, of course, Wolfenstein 3D. I'm looking at, let's see, that was
92, I think you
92,
said.
Yeah, basically.
And then Doom in 93 and Doom 2 in 94. And then 95 would have been...
let's see, 95... let's see.
96, I think you said, was... 95 was Dark Forces, and 96 was Duke Nukem 3D.
Yeah, and Quake in the same year. Yeah. So as far as, like, the standout, shooters that sort of started defining every year and year upon year, sort of some sort of step forward was happening, and obviously id was really leading the charge on that. And then Unreal comes out this year with Half-Life. But I just wanted to mention that specifically because some of the things that we're going to talk about with Half-Life, from a contextualization standpoint, the reason that some of the decisions they made in Half-Life from a storytelling perspective, from a design perspective, etc., were so influential and made such a big impact on the shooter industry because of the games that had come before were all they were all doing their own unique things, but they all were, in my opinion, kind of in a category of innovation, versus Half-Life chose to sort of go into a slightly different direction in their innovation. I guess with the exception, I'd say, of Dark Forces, which still had storytelling going on and kind of wrapping it into kind of a bigger narrative, so to speak, with context.
But one of the things I would say is that the sort of narrative wrapping of Dark Forces, while awesome, was kind of fly in on the ship and be dropped off, and level
true.
starts.
Yeah, it wasn't fully. Yeah,
it wasn't fully fleshed out, although the ideas were there. But I mean, I think up to the point of Half-Life, it would have been fair to call basically everything Doom clones. To a certain extent. I mean, there's probably you can quibble over individual titles and what this one brought or that one brought, but I think it was at the point where, and maybe we can start diving into the impact this had on the industry immediately with its demo. Was like, I mean, we were at LucasArts. It was April or May or something that this came out on a PC Gamer demo disc or something like that, and it was immediately like everybody in the company was playing it that day. I was working on what would become Starfighter, and that afternoon we basically all stopped and we're playing this demo. And there was a first-person shooter in development at LucasArts at the time. Do you recall? You know what it would be?
Was that Obi-Wan?
It was. It was what became Obi-Wan. Yeah, which ended up as a third-person. I don't know, Jedi Knight thing. But I remember everybody kind of tiptoeing around the Obi-Wan team after this game dropped because it was just such a huge bar-raising event. Like, oh my God, and this was just the demo. Just the demo, which is most of what we played. Mostly just demo. We played entirely demo content this time. We didn't quite finish to where the demo finished, but it was just, I mean, people's jaws dropped. And I think the biggest thing about that was this huge introduction that just immersed you immediately into what this world was about.
Yeah. We both, I think, talked about how the last time we'd played it, which was quite a while ago for both of us, and just reinforcing why I love doing this podcast, because just so many great memories rushing back with that opening. Just fully immersed, and I guess with the looking back at the previous shooters before this, even the Star Wars stuff, like the sort of, like, I guess I'll say, discipline of an opening like that, and even not even just the train car itself, but even once you're just walking through right before you get to the test chamber,
I wasn't even
there's
just
no
talking
combat.
about the
There's no.
Yeah, it's a commitment. It's a commitment. Yeah, it is a commitment to go. Like they said, we're going to establish this thing. This is a day at work for you.
Yeah.
And it's fairly ordinary. I mean, it's a little weird, but I mean, in terms of like, you go in and there's people that, of course, you've got this train car ride, and there's lots of little hints in there that kind of set up the character, and we can talk about those. But but it is like, you can imagine, it's like, I work in a government building and I have to go through all the security stuff, to actually get to work. And the computer's down today, and some of the equipment's having a hard time, and then you're just like stage by stage, and they introduce you as a character and your name, which is also not new here, but still, unusual. You had Duke Nukem was a character, and you had Kyle Katarn was a character, but Doom Guy wasn't it. Doom Guy was Doom Guy, and Quake Guy was Quake Guy.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it definitely wasn't. I mean, we didn't. What you looked up System Shock 1? What year was that again? Was that 93?
I think it was 90. I think it was 94.
Yeah, so it was before. I mean, I was trying to think of non-shooters that would have influenced Half-Life in a fully realizing a place kind of way. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially science fiction, and System Shock probably was one of those influential games, and Ultima Underworld. From a first-person perspective. But, yeah, in the shooter space, like, there wasn't really much, other than the Star Wars stuff, there really wasn't much of a concept of a main character. And I think the discipline, the other word I'd use for the opening is also a pacing. This building, this slow, and like you said, mundane is kind of a cool word to use for some reason for me, that in this opening. But there's this building of tension, where... Yeah. There's these little tidbits, and it's just really well paced out. And I think at the time we couldn't believe that somebody was given permission to do it this way. I guess and to incorporate all these details, and you don't know
you don't know what of them are going to be really important. You know, like in that introductory section, there's a section where the tram takes you through an area and there's these robots moving, boxes you around, and you're like, oh my god, am I going to have to fight one of those? Like, of course, you're thinking, I know this is a shooter. Am I going to have to fight one of those? Or you pass this area where there are these like toxic waste, and it's talking about toxic waste basically on the train. Yeah. Like, you know, how your suit will tell you if, you know, you're in danger or whatever from a toxic environment, and you're flying over this, you know, pool of green goo, and you look over to the left, and there's a big tank, and it's got a huge leak in the side. You know, and it's just like these lots of little details of like, this is a place that's kind of falling apart.
Yeah, it's this dysfunctional corporation mentality, right? Where like, they're saying one thing and acting another. Yeah. And like the details, like I was struck for some reason. There's this one section in the tram area where you stop and a door opens, like even just the doors opening, right? The attention to detail that with like gears and bars and like just kind of multi-step, which really wasn't a thing at the time. And I'm getting into details, but I still think it's just an example of attention to detail. But then there's this one section where you stop, and then like the rail that your car is on, like the one in front of you has to like extend forward to match up with the one you're on, and like they just chose to like literally stop the player. Not only are you in a car, you can't do anything, but now you're waiting for this this track to kind of extend out and connect, and it's like, but it just feels like a fully realized place, you know.
And you know, it is like the world's slowest roller coaster. But it still builds tension like a roller coaster does, right? Yeah. It's like you know, 5 minutes or whatever, or 10 minutes of climbing the hill on the roller coaster, right? Chuck. You know, it's just like, when am I going to get to that point where I'm going over? You know,
we haven't seen anything like this before, right? So I mean, like this exact thing coming out today, right, wouldn't really stand up. But at the time, like, it's the world's slowest roller coaster, but you have full control in the car, right? You're first person. You can run around and look at out each of the windows and stuff, and you're just taking it all in. You're like, what's that robot doing? Oh, that one robot's literally walking into the toxic waste. That's cool. Oh, there's this one guy down below who missed the tram. He's running for the tram, and he misses it.
Or and here's a security guard banging on a door that somebody locked him out of, or, you know, there's a tram going the other way, and it's got the G-Man in it that we don't know about yet. I was just going to
say, like, there's this guy in a business suit who, what's his deal, you know? And
his little briefcase, you know, standing apart. Yeah, there's just so much, and the environment is really large scale.
Yeah.
And you know, you have areas where you have these huge sort of natural-looking caverns, you know, with, you know, lots of space above you or whatever. You know, you get to a point where it like just opens up a grate in the floor and you drop down even lower, you know. So it's just like building and building and building, and you get there, and you have to wait and watch this guy walk all the way down to open the door for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, and then you go and you can run out ahead of him, and you have to wait for him to walk all the way back. It's so good.
Well, and he says, like,
and he's talking about, hey, how you doing, Gordon? You know?
You were late, aren't you? I feel like he's
running a little late today, Gordon.
Yeah.
Oh, but man. He's not in any kind of hurry to help you out.
No, it just reinforces that kind of that mundane, you know, that like day in the life of, well, day one, right? I mean, that was the title of the demo. And this was, you know, still in the age where demos were important and a thing that everybody did. And it was actually pretty long for a demo, I recall. And so I think that was another thing where who knows what their conversations were when, you know, they were working on this. But, you know, for them to be as bold as having this full thing come out and, like, making an impression, because, you know, this is a brand new company, right?
Right.
And didn't really know much about them. I don't really think. I mean, Gabe's name was known, but I don't think.
Yeah, but not
in
really
my circles.
Not really the people who played games. I mean, Chris Corry, with whom we worked, had been, you know, kind of in the business world prior to this, and he knew all about Gabe Newell. But, you know, he was kind of unusual in that regard.
Yeah.
You know, he knew the name, and he knew his sort of, you know, where he had come from and all that stuff. But the rest of us didn't really know. that sort of thing.
Oh, and then the other interesting theme that I thought was also took some discipline that kind of related to Valve as a company, but even just something as simple as the title and the theme of kind of I guess I'll say nerdy scientist, and just science as a basis, rather than, if you look at the games that came before that we mentioned, it's all that sort of bravado-based, fantasy fulfillment, right, of everybody, and maybe the Star Wars stuff, being the maybe sort of an exception of a slightly different type of hero, but basically the same, the rogue kind of character.
Yeah, more of a bounty hunter type.
But, and I don't know, I don't know if they've ever talked about it before, but just where that came from and what their motivations were for making the hero a scientist, and this concept that you're kind of the unlikely hero, right? And I feel like the everyman was something we talked a lot about when this game came out, and this concept of the scientist kind of overcoming great odds, as we'll see throughout the game. And that was just a rare thing, but after this game came out, more and more of that started happening, right? Where you're playing more of that everyman character kind of overcoming odds, rather than the Doom guy or the Quake guy or whatever, right? Which was just more of that kind of pulp kind of feel, I guess.
Right, and I mean, I would even go further and say that today's walking simulators, as they call them, really have their genesis here as well, because those typically involve characters who are ordinary. I mean, they could be anybody.
Yeah.
And although the lineage is not super direct and there's a lot of time between them, at least a decade, you still feel like there's a lot of, the storytelling influence of that and the character choice, are a pretty big deal. And really kind of fork the first-person shooter at this point to a certain degree. And it really would never be the same again, Yeah,
and I think that even System Shock 2, probably pulled some stuff from here too, and had some influences there, which we already played. That was 2002. Am I remember that right?
2001, I think.
Something like that. Yeah. Halo, of course, in there someplace. Marathon, we forgot to mention, came out before this too. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the forgotten Mac games.
Yeah, it's on the list. I just missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that would have been around this time, a couple of years before this as well, or maybe early 90s.
No, Marathon was 94. No, it was
94.
Earlier,
okay.
Yeah. Rise of the Triad, sure. Heretic.
And that, to be fair, I mean, I think that the Marathon games sort of had more story in them, but they were just not played as much.
No, it was. Well, I think Marathon specifically. My memory, though, I think. It was more of a lore backstory thing. It wasn't really story. You know what I mean?
It wasn't in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was more like this.
Res, as they say.
Yeah. And I also do want to call out a quick one that Alien vs Predator was 94, which I'm in disbelief of. But
you're thinking probably of AVP2, which was the Lift Tech game, which was after this.
Rebellion. Okay, maybe so. Yeah. No. One was good. I don't see it.
Pretty
on the
similar. Yeah.
I
remember playing some AVP2 after this. But anyway, we're a little off the beaten path.
I was only mentioning that one because of the context of story based stuff. But anyway,
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was different. Like leaning on a license and going with military dude or alien or predator.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So you bring so much to the table already when you're seeing, I don't know, Michael Biehn or something as being the main character, and or the other fantasy characters, science fiction characters, in the Predator and the Alien, right? I mean, that brings a lot to the table. Here they establish so much, and it's great. I mean, you go in and, like, people talk to you. I mean, they might just say a little thing, but it feels like a real place where you might work. Oh, I get to work, and then I go put on my suit. And there's guys in the kitchen, and you can fiddle with the microwave and make his food blow up. There's a lot of interactivity in this early section that is non-traditional interactivity at the time. Stuff that just you would never think to do 2 years before, even the year before. And after it, you couldn't not do it. I would say Thief maybe is one where that's less true. just because so much of what Thief was about was trying to make these real sort of house-like environments for the most part.
Yeah.
Except for maybe the last couple levels. And maybe even another one in between, I can't remember. But for the most part, like, this is the time where interactivity starts to change. They start to use the same verbs that they use for using stuff in the environment that matters as progression blocking or whatever, to do silly stuff, and or just to have a little bit more fun with. I mean, go and turn on the hand dryer, turn on the water in the sink. Couldn't get into the
lights on and off.
Turn lights on and off. Yeah, for sure.
Electricity rules and water and materiality kind of interacting with each other and things like that. Just wasn't done in this, at least in this genre. So
the other game this year, I would say, that has a very similar sort of cinematic opening. In the
go ahead, say it.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
You knew I was going there. Because I remember that similarly making a splash, no pun intended, of having that kind of long drawn out with the credits rolling at the same time as the intro, because that's going on in Half-Life as well. Like the teams' names are showing up in the bottom left as you play.
Yeah, very cinematic. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was very similar to Metal Gear, which had a totally different background, right? And wasn't drawing on any of these influences, probably, because it being a Japanese game, and there being a lot less crosstalk between the two cultures, I think, at that time.
Yeah, though, yeah. Oh, can't wait till we play that one. But Kojima is very influenced by Western film.
That's true. Yeah. Film, not so much games.
Yeah, not games as much. I was doing a couple quick searches. Apparently, they called that engine the Gold Source engine.
That's what it became.
Yeah. Okay. So it was heavily modified.
I did look that up. Yeah. So it was basically Quake. With their modifications, especially to support the level streaming.
Right, so they did license it, yeah.
Yeah, they did. And then ultimately, I want to say Team Fortress, they hired the Team Fortress people who had made a mod for Quake, which was the original Team Fortress, to come and make Team Fortress Classic, in what they were then calling the Gold Source engine. And that's when it became Source.
Got it.
But even then, they still brought in Quake 2, I think, for Half-Life 2 as a baseline, but changed so much and incorporated a real physics engine. But that's another game.
Yeah, and then I was kind of looking up some of the influences too. I guess Mark Laidlaw had said that the short story "The Mist" by Stephen King. There was an episode in The Outer Limits called "The Borderland" that was an influence for him. Which I haven't seen. I maybe have seen it, but I don't remember which one that is. And then, of course, Area 51 as a concept was obviously really big, the Black Mesa influence and such. But yeah, just the concept of a theoretical physicist.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things I was going to come back to is that he's not even like a researcher. He's a research assistant. And,
yeah. They have the title cards in the beginning where they kind of tell you who you are.
Tell you who he is, and his disaster response priority.
Yeah,
is discretionary. So you're like, you're not an important person in this world, and you're surrounded by lots of older and wiser people, and also people with guns.
You're expendable,
all these security people, but you're nobody. You don't have a gun, and you only probably newly minted your PhD, which is also just not fantasy fulfillment for anyone. At this time, like, nobody wants to play the PhD guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just such an interesting choice, but however intentional it was, it allowed them to stand out in this sea of shooters that were all, like you said, Dune clones, or all about that sort of hardcore fantasy fulfillment, and I'm also seeing here that Gabe actually had a quote where their goal was to make an immersive world rather than a shooting gallery, was the quote. Yeah. So, that they had a very specific, I don't know, just a bunch of interesting choices kind of culminating that I think just created an unexpected moment in time, where most of us were just kind of looking at how do you chase Doom, how do you chase id,
right. And how do you outdo that?
And they just went in a different direction.
Yeah,
Kind of that Nintendo model of like
speeding it up. They slowed it down.
Yeah.
And in one way, I mean, the tactic works really well because you build up a sense of normalcy for a long time in an environment that's still kind of a little bit strange, but you're building up a sense of normalcy, something that we can all connect to before things go crazy. And that makes the contrast between that normal stuff and that, that much starker.
Yeah.
But it does it all in the world rather than in any other way.
Yeah, that was the other thing. It's extreme versus, say, Dark Forces. It's extreme commitment to first person and a silent protagonist. Yep. Was also, I think, a key thing. Key decision for them to make, and you're totally right on the buildup of that pacing and that buildup to that test chamber, where you do feel like this is just kind of a mundane thing. You got some foreshadowing of like some things breaking. You're like, oh, this doesn't look like it's going to go well.
We've never pushed this far. Yeah, I've never. I mean, our chance of having a resonance cascade failure is like less than 1%. And
yeah, but then when it, like you said, that contrast, or when it actually happens, you're just so much more in disbelief that this is happening to you.
And how very strange it goes. Like you have these moments where the lights cut out, and there's a spot where they really extend it. Like the first time the lights go out, it's a long time, and you're like breathing in this test chamber. It's like,
yeah.
And you're like, and I'm sitting here going, how long is this going to go on? Like, I don't remember this. And then eventually, it's like you pop into that other world.
Those flashes are so cool.
And it's like, and you move around a bit, and you're like, oh my God, is this where I'm going to be? Oh, no, I'm back.
Yeah.
And in fact, you probably spend less time in that other world than you do anticipating it.
Yeah. And you can move around while you're there too,
exactly.
which is even cooler. And I think we'll talk about this probably by the end when we get to the end. But those initial moments were so much more effective than what they do with it later. The less is more mentality was really what they should have really focused on. But we'll get there. We'll get there later.
There's also one of the things I really appreciate in this whole area is there's a lot of buildup of the verbs. Now we played this differently. You played the tutorial, and I didn't. So you want to talk a little bit about the tutorial, because I was going to talk about how the game itself tutorializes, but there is also a tutorial optional.
Yeah, you should talk about that coming in dry. And I just had forgotten there was a tutorial, so I wanted to make sure I played it. But first of all, voice acting right off the bat throughout the tutorial by the hologram lady. It's all in fiction, right? It's written in fiction, so you kind of feel like you're Gordon learning how to use the suit. And they actually go pretty in-depth. They teach you about all the physics systems with moving boxes around, how to move, push and pull boxes, how to do a long jump if you have the long jump thing. Stuff that I just totally don't remember. Exploring underwater and the training of that. They introduce, like, during one of the training sections, there's the same doctors that you meet later are up in rooms observing you and talking to you. They tell you about, like, different ways to take damage. They're basically training you up on your suit, but it's all kind of the different, like a crouch jump, what a crouch jump is. And then there's also, I wanted to really quickly mention lip sync. They had rudimentary lip sync in this game too, which was also
sock puppet style, but
pretty rare. I mean, it was just mouth
open, mouth closed. But it's very effective.
Yeah,
well, I mean, the thing is with that, is that when your models look like that, that's fine. That's enough, right? Because it's so it's at a level of abstraction. It's totally fine. But when you're going around in the car, there's not a lot of verbs you have yet, though you can jump. And one of the funny things is if the car is moving and you jump, you slide back. So there's no like momentum on Gordon with the car. You don't stay in one place, you jump and the car keeps moving and you fall back into the car, further back in the car. It's pretty
funny.
Pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that once everything goes haywire, really, you do have a moment where there are a couple things in the test chamber you have to do. One is you have to push a thing into you have to push the sample into the electric whatever, into the beam so that they can inundate it and maybe cause a resonance cascade failure, I guess. And you have to go up the ladder. And you have to use a thing, right? So you start getting these game verbs that are going to be critical to your traversal later, right off the bat. And then soon after, you're getting introduced to crouching, because you have to crouch to get out, I think, of that room. Maybe a little bit further on. Once you get the crowbar, certainly you have to crouch. You start to learn all these different systems at different times.
Breaking glass.
Yeah, breaking glass. The jump and crouch to get into a small space that's above waist height or whatever, or at waist height, which was we're so used to these days having mantling. As the more common thing, which I think is thief. I think thief may be the first mantler. It's certainly the oldest one I can remember. But a mantle mechanic is typically, you go up to a thing, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, you walk up to a thing that you can climb, you press the space bar to jump, and you just hold it. And it just, instead of jumping, will pull you up. And usually you'll get a short animation in first person of, like, I'm being lifted up by, I'm pushing up with my arms to get up to this space. Like you would do to climb a small fence or something like that. And here it's like... And I had totally forgotten that this was a thing at the time, but you would jump and press the crouch button immediately after jumping, so you'd be small, so you could get into these small spaces, above, at your jump height, basically. It's just such a different that you never see that anymore. So it's just that one really stuck out to me as a strange thing. And there would be times where I'd be like, "How do I do this?" And then I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have to do that crouch thing."
Yeah, and the funny thing is in the training, they teach you specifically that. They're okay, now we're going to teach you how to crouch jump. And what you need to do is have you repeat it. And, one of the other early verbs you learn about, both in the training and in the game, which was a kind of cool little addition, is to interact with NPCs who will then follow you.
Right.
And that becomes sort of both a soft mechanic as well as a critical path mechanic along the way, where you need them to open up optical locks.
That's a good point. Yeah, there's like a black scientist, next to that broken machine that you first passed, and he's helping another scientist who's on the ground, and you have to go up and bump him or maybe hit the E button on him. I can't recall which, but you have to interact with him, and he'll say, "Oh, you need me to open that door." And then the environment will break the next door. So you're like, "Oh, I don't want to get in the way of, I have to be careful of things like these things in the environment." You get a crouch section where you have to walk under some lasers. I mean, there's just like thing after thing after thing. And it's funny, it reminds me of what I try to tell people who want to learn to program. This is going to sound like a weird thing, but it's to learn to program well. It's better to have a problem that you want to solve, that you're solving using programming, than to learn programming for its own sake. And because then you remember things better, and you build tactics better, and you just internalize things a lot more quickly when there's a goal in mind. And so that's what's going on here, is tons of like environmental...
It's all contextualized.
Navigation, where everything, like... You learn rules implicitly as you go, like, oh, I need to crouch in order to get through these spaces. Oh, I need to crouch. I see a space of that same size above me, so I can jump and crouch, right? I mean, you can just figure them out very quickly, but it's because you want to do a thing, not because the activity in itself is interesting.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that in this game, and it's just one after another. I mean, through this whole section.
Well, and there's no other than the training level that's separate, which it's kind of in retrospect kind of weird that they made that thing at all, because it really technically didn't need to, probably. But one of the things that Valve ultimately does become notorious for is their immense amount of usability testing. And this, the day one, as far as to Brett's point about teaching you verbs along the way, I mean, there's no training prompts that come up. There's no there's no tutorialization per se. It's all just contextualized within the world. And so, yeah, like to your point, you're learning it more effectively that way. But you're also learning it before you know it. You're just doing it. Like it's really, the level design's impeccable. Like the pacing of that stuff is just really methodically put together. So you're just kind of like innately doing what you need to be doing. In most cases.
Yeah, things that just make sense in the environment that you're in. There are a couple of those that I had forgotten about, and one is, well, I guess they're both more or less the same thing, but is the amount of platforming.
Yeah, right.
Or, I don't know if you'd exactly call it. There are spaces where it's platforming explicitly, but there are spaces where you have to do those long jumps and jump across to get to a ladder.
Navigation-based gameplay in a shooter, which there were some of that in the previous ones, but also this is an era where shooters didn't have very many. There wasn't a diverse amount of mechanical categories. You know what I mean?
Right. And
platforming was still an important thing for shooters because they wanted some of that pacing change from just shooting. Yeah. And then did you find another thing I forgot from a movement and controls perspective? There's extra momentum on your movement. Not only are you moving at lightning speed, which I forgot about, like you are moving fast, and the FOV is to a degree where it makes it even faster, feeling even faster. But when you let your finger off of the movement button, you still take a couple more steps.
Yeah, there's momentum. Yeah.
So, which I don't feel like many of the other shooters really embrace that much. I could be misremembering, but it kind of threw me off at first, and it makes those navigation sections really...
Exactly, yeah. I'm thinking about there's a section where you have to climb up a ladder and then jump across a series of basically hanging boxes to get down to the other side, and that is so nerve-wracking exactly for that. But they put these, basically the wires they're hanging from, have these blocks. Yeah, the cables, they block you, so you basically line up and you jump towards the cable. But every now and again you'll miss just a little bit, and it'll carry you just a little bit past it.
Yeah,
it does add that, and I think it adds a layer of movement realism.
Yeah.
That is a little bit different. We would see stuff like that in Tribes, I think, maybe. Just a little bit later, like 99 or maybe 2000, where momentum was part of the movement and led to the infamous exploit of the sort of, jump skiing down a hill and getting this huge amount of momentum going because there was an error in the calculation or something like that. I forget how it worked exactly. Rocket sledding or whatever they call that. I don't remember what they called it.
It probably was a choice of immersion that they were trying to achieve with Half-Life. I just had forgotten how kind of sloppy, intentionally sloppy and kind of unforgiving it really is, because it makes you, because you're playing on a keyboard, so it's digital input. You can't really feather it, so
right.
It's really kind of unnerving.
Yeah, well, and
I believe
it makes some of the combat more interesting, especially when you just have the crowbar, because you got to run up and whack the whatever they're called, the zombies basically that have the head crabs on a body, right? You have to run up to those things now. But your momentum's going to carry you right into them. It's going to take you a bit to back up. So you're trying to learn that timing and that rhythm and that sort of dance of that combat of jumping in and getting in a couple whacks before he swipes with his hands. Early on, you don't have a lot of ammo, so you're really relying on you don't even have a gun for a while. You've just got the crowbar, so you're really relying on that crowbar, and it's almost telling you to watch your step all the time, because there's places where, through the level design, they're taking you through a vent frequently, and on the other side of the vent, there's something that's going to jump at you. A head crab, probably, maybe one of those dog things that makes the audio attack is going to appear. We should talk about enemy design. Maybe in the future because we'll get to more enemies. But it's almost teaching you look before you leap constantly. Because your momentum, you've got this physical movement that itself, causes you to have to pause that way.
I feel like I kept forgetting to test it out, but I feel like if you hold shift down while you're walking, maybe you don't fall off ledges, which a lot of games were doing at this era.
Interesting.
To prevent you from, if you really wanted to be careful with some of those edges, I think you might be able to do that.
Okay, that's good to know. Because
I need to test it out.
There were some places where, there's an elevator shaft where I fell down because because it's hard to move just a little bit. Like you said, you can't really feather it. You got to, just tap it. Hope you can tap it and move into position and grab the ladder before you fall, 4 stories or wherever it is down some elevator shaft. Just so much in this early section. We haven't even played up to the point where the Marines show up, which is where the demo basically ended. Though we're right at that point. And to switch gears a little bit, another macro topic that we'll probably come back to time and time again that was also a game changer for them in this era was just that concept that there really aren't levels per se. Right.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about the engine and streaming kind of loading of that stuff, because, we're playing on fast machines now, so it's super fast. But even at the time, this concept of a shooter with essentially the perception of a fully connected world that was cohesive. You can go backward and forward, right? Versus the other shooters of the time, it was very level based, and you played and finished a level, then you loaded the next level, and you played and finished a level.
And they gave you stats and stuff like that in between levels. Yeah, this was a real step forward for that. And of course, I do remember at the time how, on the one hand, it felt really cool that it was a continuous experience, but on the other, it felt like I go 30 steps and then I reload again, right? So there was memory concerns. I'm sure, just in order to get the performance up, there's no way at the time you could have had this whole, say, the section between chapter 1 or even just the train ride. You could not have had all of that in memory and culling everything out. It just wouldn't have worked. The performance would have been so dog slow.
Is it, when were streaming engines starting to happen? And was this an early version of a concept of a streaming engine? Or I guess streaming engines must have been before this, right?
Yeah, streaming engines are certainly before this, and, it was very common on consoles, actually. And one of the differences always between consoles and the PC was that it was very difficult to do certain types of games on the PC. In particular, a Mario-style side-scrolling platformer was very difficult to do on the PC, although more recently that John Romero's kind of come out and talked about how they did that. And around this time, a little bit before this time, they did Unreal did Jazz Jackrabbit, which had the same sort of stuff. But because the hardware was more general purpose, it was difficult. Some things were just difficult to do. In fact, for Starfighter, at this time, we were looking at streaming in huge amounts of data on the PC. We were still a PC title at that time. And it just wasn't feasible. The operating system just really didn't hold the hooks for us to do it in a continuous way. And here, they kind of found a way to do it where, there is a stop, there is a pause. Our hard drives are really fast now, and they're not loading much data, for each individual chunk, and a lot of the data is shared. Textures and things like that, character models are going to stay in memory. So the amount of stuff you're loading is probably, sort of the environmental models, and the layout and all that stuff that you're gonna bring in. Piece by piece, eventually things are going to drop out. But but you do stop, and at the time you stopped for a lot longer period of time.
But I don't remember it being
it was never oppressive.
Too bad, yeah. And just the concept that, and I did it multiple times in this playthrough where, you get to one of those and you go forward and you're like, oh, wait a second, I forgot about that ammo back there. I'm going to turn around and go back.
Now, they did it. It was very difficult for them to do it. They basically built all the levels and then had all the chunks as individual level data, and had to make them stitch together perfectly, so that you would go. Even though you feel like you're in the same hallway, you're actually in a whole new hallway when you cross one of those boundaries.
Right.
That's just been loaded in.
When you turn around and look at the hallway,
they've recreated everything behind you.
But then
so it's not truly a streaming engine for that reason.
Right. But it's simulating,
it is simulating, right. The perception is it's a continuous streaming engine, but I don't believe that it was, and I know I've read, I mean, it's been years since I read about it, but I know that I've read that they had those kind of problems where, just to make the demo nearly killed them in order to stitch up a lot of those things. And watching a video of the demo today, because I wanted to remind myself of whether there had actually been differences between the demo and the final product, there were a lot more glitches, especially at those boundaries where like models would just kind of glitch out or disappear or whatever, and it just looked a little janky. And a lot of that was just them not having quite finished a polish pass to make everything line up again. So,
yeah. I mean, the perception. I mean, regardless of the technical aspects, the perception of that was very successful, I thought, and even turning around and seeing that fake hallway, it gives you the sense of that. But then they also would need some sort of persistent, state tracker, right?
Yes.
Because you can go and pick up this one clip of ammo in the previous level, leave another one, and then go forward, and then go back and get that second one if you wanted to. So it needed to.
It needed to accommodate very much the way System Shock 2 would do, a couple of years later, and
probably Thief. Well, Thief was level based though.
Yeah, Thief was a whole level,
Yeah.
but they probably also pulled geometry in and out. I can't remember.
I think they were more discrete. That Thief was this year, and it was more discrete, level by level. Right? You'd finish a level. You couldn't go back.
Level. Correct.
Yeah. So you're right. System Shock 2 was probably the first. Ultima Underworld and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, the amount of data that you have to save to remember that you've dropped something or moved something around or whatever is comparatively little, right? It's some kind of identifier and then a position and or some other state. I mean, it's like a few bytes, really, a handful of bytes, say 20 or 30 bytes or something like that per object. So you're not talking huge amounts of data, and I can't remember if Quake 1 was fixed point engine or not. And we talked about this a long time ago. I don't think so. I think Quake might have been. I can't remember if it's floating point or not. I'd have to look that up. But yeah, fixed point. Yeah, I think it's fixed point. Certainly Unreal was this year, where everything's represented as integers rather than floating point, which is what we use these days. So there's like a built-in level of precision. It's consistent, throughout the range of what they call the domain of the space. But anyway, yeah, I don't want to dive into that too much because it's
I'm just listening.
Yeah, I know. Now, I feel like Unreal was fixed point and Quake was floating point, but I'll have to look that up for next time. Yeah. But it's just not a lot of data, I guess, is my point that you're saving for any.
Yeah, right. Well, it had to be right. Like those days, you had to be efficient with your data use. Yeah, which is kind of like to some degree. I'm sure you guys as programmers feel this all the time. Like there's a discipline that comes with that.
Yeah.
That today I feel like we're just sloppier and less disciplined.
Yeah, we don't
need to. Yeah, so...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like probably as you in this game, as you get further and further away from things, they probably start saving stuff out to disk as well, right? It's not like the whole game... It's not like when we get to the end of the game, it's going to have in memory, where some bullet that you didn't pick up is.
I also think that
first level.
Up to this point, there's been a few different areas that we will go through, but I do believe they're one way, drop-offs and things and one-way doors and stuff that at certain points you're not going to go back. We'll see as we go. I have a vague memory of that.
That's definitely true. For example, at the beginning, when you come in, there's that desk where the computer's broken. You can come all the way back out to that, but when you come all the way back out to it, it's a different. It's not the same thing. They've copied it. But it's not literally the same thing.
I just meant like when you get to the end of the game, you won't be able to go all the way back to the beginning. As they've cut. There will be certain points throughout the game where there will be point of no returns, even though they're technically not level based as a game. There are definitely chunks. I think that there'll be a point of no return.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're about to come up to one. Next time we'll definitely we'll cross one that's very that's very much a cutoff.
I mean, a couple quick topics we can hit next time. Maybe like we want to talk about enemy design, and we probably too much to go into now.
We haven't seen it.
Yeah, and there'll be more to come. I just think even in this section they introduce the enemies so well, and
that's true.
And they're all so distinct. And then audio design, I think is some of the best definitely this era. Maybe like as far as like impact in game history. I mean, there's just so much good, like the sounds of some of the things in this game, even just the UI elements and the sound your suit makes. The sound the enemies make, like I still remember them to this day.
Powering up your health,
powering up your health. Oh man, like
something we straight borrowed from Republic Commando.
Yep. Rainbow Six came out this year too. We forgot to mention, but
no, we mentioned it. Yeah.
Oh, did we? Okay.
Yeah.
And then physics in general, like physics puzzles and physics interactions and those sorts of is another category that you mentioned a little bit. But yeah, audio design, enemy design. Alt fire, I guess that was already a thing. I feel like that's something that'll come up. And the weapon design.
Alt fired a weapon yet?
So I did in the training.
Oh, okay. Can you do it with the pistol or the shotgun?
I don't know. I didn't. I think I tried actually. Yeah, I don't think either of them do have it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see about that next time when we start getting more weapons.
What were some of your favorite, like really quick, because I think we're coming up on time and I think we want to do letters and stuff, right?
Yep.
What were a couple of do you have any favorite moments from this first section?
I think my favorite things are actually all the little human interactions.
Yeah.
Like I love the Barneys, the security guards, and how you'll come up on one and he'll be shooting these things that came out of nowhere. And he'll be like, well, there's another one for my wall. Or, they just say the funniest stuff that I just really, really love. And those things coming across them again was like, hello, old friend. I remember you.
Yeah.
And of course they're all the same. There's far more scientists than there are different security guards. But yeah, those are the things that I really
the character.
connect with.
I mean, it just was rare at this time, right? Especially to have friendly NPCs as a
shooter, yeah.
Yeah, as a riffing off of that for me, one of my favorite moments is because many of the characters you can just interact with them, and sometimes you can have more than you can have 2 or 3 all following you around if you've interacted with them, and they'll follow you for a time. And then they just kind of will die eventually, or you can try to keep them alive as long as you can. You can lead them into turrets that are accidentally, have them killed. But there's this one section where there's you come around the corner and you see the G-Man and he's up on the catwalk, and then he walks away and you're like, dude, you bastard. And then you can't get up there fast enough. And then when you get up there, you go up there and you realize that there's a armory that's locked, and then you can find a scientist around that area, and you can have him come with you. And he'll come and open the door.
He'll use the retinal scan, right? Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And just like that being basically a lock and key, right? Where typically you would find like a red key card in the past.
Right. Exactly.
To have this actually be a character that you're interacting with, and could die, right? You could.
Yeah, you might not be able to open it because
you could probably shoot him as well as he could die from an enemy or something. But
yeah, there was another good moment with the G-Man where you walk up this stairway and to your right there's like a red, locked door. The red doors are typically locked and you can only open them from one side. And you kind of come up and he walks up to the glass, and because it's dark on your side, he, in theory, would be seeing a mirror, and he just kind of comes up and he looks at it and he adjusts his tie and he turns around and he walks out.
Oh, I missed that. I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's a good moment too.
That's another thing about this is that you can, because
it's not linear. There are
there's
things
no cinematics, right? So so people will your mileage may vary. That was a goal that we had for Republic Commando as well, right? All first person. Events will happen in the world, and you'll see them or you won't. So
right. Yeah, and that's one thing I think that they really learned a lot, by the time they get around to Half-Life 2, especially in the opening section of Half-Life 2, all the things that they want you to see, they don't make you see them, but you still see them.
Composition. That's...
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of that is in the audio design. But I think we'll get to some of those topics next time. You want to take a quick break?
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. I wanted to throw out, before we get into a little feedback, I wanted to mention, in connection with our Planescape Torment episodes, a podcast that I listen to. It's hosted by a friend and his co-host, Chris Hulentrop and JJ Sutherland, called Shall We Play a Game? Played a bit of Planescape Torment a bit back in January. And I think I don't think the new extended edition was out yet. But they were sort of playing it in connection with Tides of Numenera, I think, or maybe Tyranny, both of which have come out in the last year or so. I actually bought Tides of Numenera. I haven't gotten to it yet.
I want to play it now, yeah. I mean, this happens every episode or every series.
Every series we're like, we got to play.
I've heard good things about Tyranny, too.
Yeah, me too. Unfortunately, I don't think that one did as well, but I think because you play a bad guy and you're,
Yeah, but it sounds fascinating.
That's maybe a little touchy these days. I don't know.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, I hear you play some kind of just giant orange creature. Go figure. Anyway, we've been lagging behind on the feedback for a while, last couple of episodes at least. So we want to read a few, and then we'll get to some more next time. You have the first email.
Okay, so here email. Hello, Game Dev Club. My name is Johnson Blue Xiao from Hong Kong, and I've been listening for quite a while thanks to a tweet by Ian Millum from a while ago. Shout out to Ian, friend of ours, both of ours.
Yep, absolutely.
Old LucasArts fellow. Hi, Ian. While not specifically a Planescape Torment question, listening to Brett and Tim's, or Tim and Brett's, playthrough of this rather unorthodox RPG has led me to wonder about the reception of games with design choices that may stray from what is generally accepted as the natural evolution of the genre. And I do not mean design choices that bring the game forward or backward by however many paces, but those that place it to the side. Do you think it is a title as such... Do you think it is a title as such be released today and could be as well received as Planescape Torment once it was? Let me explain my thoughts a little bit further. There seems to be a growing popularity in a mindset that is matched by the design think pieces and videos which break down games and their design. This has made me curious regarding the current accepted beliefs and philosophies of game design and players. While these thoughts can lead to amazing analytical pieces, I am slightly concerned at how it can narrow people's mentality with all of the theorizing and what's considered objectively better, thus affecting their reception of the game. To use an analogy, take it with some dose of skepticism, you can analyze and explain a joke, but it loses its humor by the end. And if you haven't heard the joke, you're left with an explanation explanation for the humor you haven't experienced. Or perhaps I am simply overthinking about all of this. Keep up the good work. Cheers, Johnson.
Yeah, there's a long and winding and complicated one that I had a hard time condensing last week. I was going to ask Chris Avellone questions from the audience, but that one I just could not find a way to narrow down. I mean, I do think on the one hand there is. I think this was more of a problem in the past than it is now, I guess is where I would go. I think that, in the in-between times, between the big years where everything seems to move forward, there does seem to be some calcification that happens. I think that happens a lot less today because there is a more thriving indie ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that we, as developers will draw on for inspiration or ideas or what have you that make there not be one true path forward. That said, in the AAA space, there are a handful of games that are really dominant, and dominate year after year. Your Calls of Duties and your, whatever, your League and your, I don't know. I don't play those. Overwatch, I guess, is a new one in that sort of.
Yeah, Overwatch
area.
is a new game. Yeah.
Well, it's just it's in the.
Just kidding.
It's in the and it's sort of in that vein of the almost MOBA. It's more of a first-person MOBA, I guess. I haven't played it. It's not
it's Team Fortress 2. Yeah, basically.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. I didn't play that either. So.
With heroes, yeah. It's funny because we kind of talked a little bit about this with Chris on the episode where he was kind of talking about summarizing, the internal reception to Torment beforehand and kind of his nervousness, and then how everything was kind of okay after it came out because it was so well received because it was so different,
Right.
And him being kind of surprised, and I think everyone else being surprised, and then he was kind of talking about Brian Fargo's, sort of commitment to allowing them to see it through despite kind of all the trials and tribulations and how different it was. So I agree with Brett that the landscape's so different now where not only are we influenced, but sometimes even unfortunately borrowing or stealing from indies because I think they're taking more of the risks than AAA are taking, unfortunately. And as a kind of as a related note to that, though, I do think that the key to Planescape still does resonate with people, in that I was actually just talking about it today with your friend Troy Mashburn as well.
Oh, no kidding.
Who works with us now.
Oh, tell him I said hello.
Yeah, I will. And, we were just talking about just the general concept of giving players what they don't know they want. You know what I mean? And that calcification comes in, as Brett is I think, appropriately describing it, where, the calcification happens because we think we know what players want and we just keep giving them more of it. But really the games that really start standing out, even in the AAA space, and especially in the indie space now, are the ones that you just didn't even think of, or that you didn't know you wanted, or it's taking something like Planescape, taking the RPG and going to the side, as Jonathan says, or as Johnson says, and it takes balls to do that with AAA games, and it's really hard to do it. But I think they can, to answer one of his core questions, they can succeed. They definitely can.
I definitely agree. I also think,
and should succeed.
The number of people who spend time reading about games compared to the number who play them is a pretty small number, in the grand scheme of things too. So, the amount to which that, we do because we're developing them, but even that, I don't read nearly as much as I used to. Back in the 90s and early aughts, I read everything, that would come out about games, period. Nowadays, I'm much less so, but yeah, I used to be on top of all that stuff. I think, the audience at large mostly doesn't, read too much in the way of analysis about games, or, participate in podcasts or what have you. So, I think it's kind of a relatively small number.
I think you do need to. I think as a craft, though, you do need to. I agree about your audience point, but as far as game developers, you do need to kind of go deep into things to understand where to break rules and when to not break rules.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Another big thing that changed as far as the analytical side of things is education in game development from when Planescape came out to now. You have a lot more schools basically going deep into analytics and philosophizing, as he said, about what makes a game and kind of overthinking things, as he was admitting to, and I do the same. I think we both do the same, but I have these new designers coming in, or any discipline coming into the company from school, and they've already gone through, years and semesters of overthinking stuff, and it's really interesting to come in with fresh, young, junior developers who are already coming in with this sort of like over analysis.
Right. And then you just say to them, we just need a Zelda thing, like a thing.
Yeah,
you get the thing so you can get the thing?
That's my direction, yeah.
That's your direction.
Yeah. And they're like, Zelda thing. What did I spend all that money on?
Exactly. I could have just played Zelda for 4 years.
Well, all right. Let's keep going.
All right. I have another email here. This one from Jordan in a rarity. He says, subject line, some praise for the podcast and a quick question. This is a good one for us. He says, hey, Brett and Tim. My friend Kai Harris, who I believe knows one of you, recently started a game club.
Yeah, I was going to mention Kai, yeah.
Okay, we play through games and we chat about our thoughts. We started Planescape Torment a few weeks before you two started to replay and review the game. My friend introduced me to your podcast, and I was instantly hooked. Oh, that's kind. I enjoy the depth of knowledge and analysis that you bring to the discussion about the games. Talking to me here. Setting all the praises aside, I do have a question. I believe one or both of you have kids, and me being a father to a 1.5-year-old, I wanted to know at what age you started exposing your kids to the world of video games, and what did you start with? I think it's going to be a while before I plop my son in front of a TV or monitor to start playing, but what are your thoughts as titans in the gaming industry on kids and screen time / video games? Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, this is a good topic. Yeah, shout out to Kai, by the way. I did forget to mention him in the last episode. He and I had lunch. He actually works for Microsoft as well. And
cool.
As a vendor, and we met up, and he was playing. He told me about them playing, and I actually forgot to ask a question to Chris for him about inventory management, because as they're playing the game much more slowly than we are at Planescape, and he said that his group has been talking about inventory management as being a weird thing in that game, because there's so many critical path items, and there's weight, there's encumbrance and limited space, and he wanted Chris to answer why that is the case in that game that doesn't really seem to need it. Because it's not really a traditional RPG, but we'll ask Chris offline, maybe get the answer. But
so as far as kids go, I want to say that my kids were, I have two sons, and they're 2 years apart, and I want to say they were like 5 and 7, 4 and 6 when I first started introducing them to games. They started off with games like Putt-Putt and Pajama Sam and Freddy Fish, PC adventure games, which was really funny because I'd be out, I'd play through it with them once, and they loved playing them. And Pajama Sam in particular, they were playing Pajama Sam, and they'd say, we're stuck, and they'd be yelling this out the window because I'd be mowing the lawn or something. And they'd yell out the window, we're stuck, we can't do the such and such. And I'd say, and I had played it before with them, and I'd say, oh, it's in this place, and they'd be like, no, it's not. And that's so I went in, and that's when I learned that Pajama Sam is actually replayable. They move some of the puzzles and change some of the puzzles around programmatically. But those were the sorts of things that they could play, and they could play together at that age.
And how old are your kids now?
My kids now are they will be 17 and 19 this summer.
Yeah, just to give some context for.
Yeah, so it was a while back. Yeah, I had a older PC, I think a PC that I actually gotten from LucasArts, and they would play those sorts of things at that age. And not too long after that, I got them Nintendo DSs when those came out with Nintendogs. So maybe a year after the DS came out, I think that was their first machine that was all theirs, and started getting them games for that. So.
Yeah, this is a good topic for me because I have a lot of inner turmoil over this topic in weird ways because...
Oh, I'll get to more. Yeah, I do too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Did you want to continue?
No, go ahead. No, I thought I'd give you a chance.
Well, I'll just do briefly, but just because my wife actually is not a gamer, and I don't know if it's fair to call her anti-gaming, but she's close.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing to in the household, but we've our daughter has she hasn't even watched really any kind of violent or scary even movies at this point. So I've stayed away from that stuff for the most part with games. I think the first thing I had her try was in the Wii era, Animal Crossing and Wii Sports and things like that. Basically Nintendo stuff, and those were reasonably successful. But the turmoil that I have is that I don't think she's a gamer. She's not as into it. We got into Minecraft pretty heavily for quite a while, and she played that we played that together on Xbox, and then she played it a lot on iPad and stuff too. And so we got pretty into that for a while, and I think I definitely would recommend that when the time comes, because I think it's a very good sandbox kind of game for any young kid. And it's, it can be scary at times, but you can turn that stuff off if you don't want to, fight enemies and stuff. So Animal Crossing, I definitely would recommend, because it's a nice, fun, passive, welcoming kind of thing. And the Wii was fun from a Wii Sports perspective just because of the novelty of it and stuff. But since then, I've tried Disney Infinity, we've tried the Lego games, and for me, I just don't think she's a gamer,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I think that despite the fact that I got them DSs, I would say in general, when my kids were sort of in the 5 to 12 age range, 5 to 14 age range, they probably played a lot fewer games than other kids their age, despite the fact that I work in the game industry.
Yeah.
We would typically, and still typically, play board games together instead, which feel more social, and you're interacting with each other. I mean, when they were little, I had a GameCube, and we would play Mario Kart Double Dash, which was great because they could be part of it. And be doing something as that second character, the character in the back, be hit the A button, throw the banana or whatever, and they would do that stuff until they got good enough to actually, to be able to play against me. Although I'm still better than either one of them. Say that right now. But yeah, and now as as young adults, one of my sons plays a fair amount. He likes Overwatch. And he and my other son basically doesn't play video games. He plays a little bit of stuff on his phone, but it tends to be those little games you can play in the messaging app where he's just having fun with a buddy more than anything else. Because he's a baseball player, and he's busy enough with school and baseball to not have that. I think fundamentally my thing about this is, and I wrote about this for my blog maybe a year or two ago, the important thing for me is to preserve their innocence as long as you can. Because for one thing, in our culture, we have a tendency, I don't even know if it's our culture, but you have a tendency to forget when you were exposed to a thing. And you tend to move it earlier, because you can't really remember when you first saw some movie or whatever that had a scary bit in it, say Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. And you might expose your kids to that younger than they're really ready for it. And what I would caution people to avoid is, getting rid of those scraps of innocence because you can't get them back. I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. And, so you want to hold off as long as you can, I think, on certain types of experiences. Things that are welcoming and warm, yeah, good. I mean, funny cartoon. If they're already watching cartoons, then Mario Kart is perfectly, fine. Yeah,
I definitely recommend Mario Kart. That's going to be, especially on the Switch, I hear is really good, and it's a good family. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, those were games that we always enjoyed together, and I like them for their, their sociability. Right? I mean, you can play you can do the races against each other. In some cases, you can play, with Double Dash, you could play together, literally. So anyway.
Yeah, it's a good point about innocence. I mean, there's plenty of time to lose the innocence.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention my daughter.
You're going to have your whole life, to do that.
she's 14 at this point, so and I think not only like we try to really support whatever. Like we try not to force anything onto her, just kind of let her lead to some degree, sort of her interests. Though we've tried a lot of different things, and I'm definitely jealous of friends at work, who play Overwatch with their kids or whatever, things like that. But not only that, but she hasn't taken to fantasy or science fiction or anything. So
wow, my kids not too much either. Movies, yeah. Yes, but not.
No, even it's just funny, yeah. But it's Nintendo's a good area to stick with when the time's right. But yeah, don't rush it.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for the questions, gentlemen. You can send us email at devgameclub@gmail.com. And we like to answer those questions on the air when we can. I think we have a few pieces of feedback where we kind of try to make our way through as well. You have the first one.
Yes, a link to my past by Lesser of Four. Brett and Tim cover a wide variety of games, and probably like most listeners, I haven't played them all. But the ones I have played were some of the most formative experiences, gaming or otherwise, in my childhood and teenage years. It's rare to be able to listen to people experience classic games for the first time, especially in this much depth. Considering what some of the games mean to me, listening to Brett and Tim discuss their discoveries is often a genuine privilege. Moreover, they are able to engage with these games as veteran creators, which offers another rarity, the opportunity to receive new insights into games that I've played more times than I can remember. Nostalgia too often becomes a mere sentiment. This podcast, however, manages to evoke the nostalgia of my gaming youth and give it new weight and meaning. As adulthood, and especially fatherhood, has pushed games to the periphery. Listening to Brett and Tim share these experiences, observations, and insights reminds me why I still love games. Wow. Well said, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we do get a few emails and reviews from people who've pushed into fatherhood and don't have time to play games as much, and this is kind of like their way to connect back.
I totally get it.
Keep the love alive. Oh yeah, definitely. I get it. This keeps me playing games as well. I have a super short one. It says, "Great podcast by KRL360, if that is your real name." I just started listening. Currently on Link to the Past, so this is a little bit older. We're a few behind. You motivated me to replay Link to the Past on my new 3DS and reappreciate how good it was and is. So he had the experience you had.
Yeah, so good.
I know.
And that save game feature definitely is a bonus. I'll have to say a little bit cheating, but it's really worth revisiting some of that older stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the opportunity to play that way, I think I would have enjoyed that a little bit more. Although readers did write in with like, "Oh, did you know you could do this? Did you know you could do this? There's a way to make your magic cost less," and things like that. So there was stuff that I just didn't find that made those games a little easier to play. But having that save anywhere feature is kind of a big deal.
Yep.
Now you have a super brief one.
Yes.
It's written for you. Yep.
Yeah. Oh geez, by Chili Dog Jr. If that is your real name. Chili Dog Jr. I gotta use that in somewhere. I'll get your permission. Oh geez. I guess I should give this podcast 5 stars.
Ooh, we'll take it.
Thanks so much. You guys are, so nice that you guys are enjoying things. Thanks for the write-ups.
And then I've got the last one. It's a podcast that revived my love in gaming by Good Job, Mr. 2%. I wanted to read this one because of the shout-out that's in it. I came over to this podcast after hearing about it from Rebel FM.
Yay!
Yay, because that's kind of where Tim was drawing the idea. The in-depth analysis and water cooler talk about games from the past sparked my interest to go back and play some of the games they have done. It has given me a new love for the classics, and most recently, the Planescape game has been a real treat playing along with it. Keep up the good work, guys. So thank you, Mr. 2%.
Yeah, definitely good. Shout out to Rebel FM. It's also fun. They don't do the game clubs anymore, but a lot of good guys on that are really funny to listen to and know the heck out of games.
Yep, they sure do. All right, sir. Well, I guess we should wrap this up. we can... first we have to do... Where are we going to play to next? Where are we going to play to next, Tim?
We are going to play... So our next 2 episodes will be 5 sections of the game each. And so we'll play... we stopped right as we got to We've Got Hostiles, so we play through that. And then Blast Pit, Power Up, On a Rail, and Apprehension. And we will stop when you get to Residue Processing. So when you see that title card come up for Residue Processing, stop there. That'll be 5 sections, 5 episodes.
Yeah, five little title cards. That's another thing we didn't even really talk about too much was the title cards. But,
yeah, just so elegant.
Yeah, it's so lovely. But yeah, well, we can talk. That'll come up, I'm sure, at some point. I look forward to playing more. I'm like chomping at the bit.
I was delightfully. I had a good time.
Yeah, so much good time in this. And I guess that's it for us. I am at Brett_Duville on Twitter, and he's
at Tim Longo Jr. with a JR.
And the podcast, of course, can be found at Dev Game Club. You can shoot us an email at devgameclub@gmail.com. We love to get your letters and read and respond. If we don't read them on the air, we do respond to them. I have a couple that I have been keeping back to find a place where we can do episodes that investigate some of the topics in the email. So, we'll talk about that offline. But sometimes if we don't read it, it's because we're trying to find a better way to work in a deeper topic. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com. And, of course, in Apple Podcasts and on Google Play and such. Please rate and review or tell a friend about the podcast. And, word of mouth is basically the only way we spread. So if you could do that, that would be a big help to us. Thanks so much. And good night.
Good night.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the music. Because the music doesn't come in for so long.
Yeah.
And then when it comes in, it's like, ba-ba! It's like, oh my God, there's music now.